So good morning or good afternoon, everyone, or good evening. Welcome to this session with this online chat with Christophe Dubi about the postponements of the Olympic Games. We're extremely happy and proud to have Christophe with us for a good hour, sharing his view on this extraordinary time for international sports and for the Olympic movement. My name is Claude Stricker. I'm the Executive Director of the AISTS, which is the International Academy of Sports Science and Technology, based in Lausanne on the shore of the Lake of Geneva, 1 mile from the International Olympic Committee headquarters. We have been created by the IOC and the universities around us, EPFL, the University of Lausanne, and other university, one of the best university in Switzerland. And we partner with all the actors, federation, and Olympic movement stakeholders in research and continuing education, especially with a master program that has currently a class of 40 present in this session that we welcome also as well. So a warm welcome to everyone. Thank you very much for your interest. And we look forward to a great session, which will be moderated by Mrs. Tina Sharma, who is also a graduate from the AISTS, an alumni, and who will take on from now and introduce as well Christophe. So thanks already to Tina and to Christophe, and I wish you a very good and interesting session.
Thank you, Claude.
Thank you, Claude. Thanks very much, and a very warm welcome to everyone who's joining us today from wherever you are in the world, and more so to the AISTS participants, because as Claude said, I am an alumna myself. I did this program a few years ago, and I couldn't be more proud to be here today. One of the main reasons we're talking today is because we are all united by this pandemic, this unprecedented situation which has hit the entire world. This has drastically altered for many of us what we consider to be normal. The human impact of this pandemic, as you all know, has been very, very big, as most of us have been under some sort of lockdown, partial or complete, for the last 2 or 3 months. Now, there is still a lot of uncertainty in the world. We don't know what's going to happen 6 months from now, 12 months from now. And that's why, as you all know, major events around the world have been canceled for the near future. And for the first time ever, the Olympic Games have been postponed by a year. Now, the decision to postpone the Games naturally could not have been an easy one. And that's why, Christophe, we're extremely grateful for you to be here today. The IOC's Olympic Games Executive Director, he's here with us to talk about that process of the decision, how it came about, the work that's currently being done by the International Olympic Committee, by the Organizing Committee in Tokyo, and many other partners in the Olympic movement to try and reorganize now for next year. Just very quickly, a little bit about Christophe Dubi. Many of you would know him already. He's been
Not
with the
too much.
I'm sure the people signed in here, Christophe, for sure, I think. But no, allow me to introduce you a little bit. He's been with the International Olympic Committee since 1996. He was appointed the IOC Sports Director in the year 2007, a role that required him to oversee basically the sports competition, but also very importantly, the relationship and collaborations with the other international sports federations. And since 2014, Christophe is the Olympic Games Executive Director. He drives the collaboration with the future hosts, with the partners across the Olympic movement, and is in charge, naturally, of all activities related to the Olympic and the Youth Olympic Games. So, Christophe, once again, thanks for being with us. On behalf of AISTS, I welcome you. And even before we start with today's main topic, I'd like to ask you, how are you? How are you doing? How has this pandemic affected you? How have you been coping in the last few months?
How can I say that? It's been the most humbling of all experience. extremely rewarding as well, and I will explain why. Difficult too, but all in all, the one thing that I rejoice about is that we are all united, and you started with this. There is no passenger in this crisis. For the first time in 50 plus years, as far as I'm concerned, I've got this feeling that people do realize in the world that we are all together. Yeah. No passenger. Everybody can contribute. For the first time, we see some professions coming to the forefront with people saluting and bowing and saying thank you, for people that never have been in the forefront the way they deserve. So very humbling in the sense that for the first time you realize that you might have a position, you might be incredibly privileged, and I consider this is my case. But we are nothing without the solidarity of all. And I knew that from management experience, being involved in different projects where you really have to pull together, where you rely on the expertise, the intelligence far greater of others to pull it together. This time it's even one level higher. Yeah. So very humbling, but at the same time, reassured that humanity can come together as well for a good cause, and that gives hope as well for us, but for the future generations. So an incredible time to be part, to witness, to reflect something that none of us probably would have imagined we would live in our lifetime.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's been one of the most amazing things about these last 2 or 3 months, that despite the situation, I think each and every one of us has been able to find some positives and come out with some silver linings, which might change what normal is for us in our societies and in our lives. And it's just, it's so fascinating to think about that. And just, so I have a lot of questions for you, obviously, but before we start with that, a little bit of housekeeping for all our participants. We would really like to be able to take your questions as well. You'll have the opportunity to put questions to Christophe towards the end of this session. So just if you look at the bottom of your screen, there's a little bar there, and there's two icons, one that says chat and the other one that says Q&A. You're welcome to post comments in the chat, but if you have a question that you'd like him to answer, please make sure you type it up in the Q&A box, and then towards the end of the session, we will start looking at your questions. And yeah, keep them coming, you know, the more, the better it is for us. So Christophe, let's actually start with the decision to postpone the games. You know, that big decision was obviously an extremely difficult one. And at one stage, the IOC had in fact said that we're giving ourselves about a month to make this decision. And then what happened was that within a couple of days, it was announced. So I think a lot of people really want to know, how did that come about? Who all were involved and what accelerated the process? Mm-hmm.
There was one event in Olympic history whom I was sadly involved as well. It was the death of Nodar Kumaritashvili, you know, the day of the opening ceremony of Vancouver. Okay. And that was a crisis. It was one event. We've learned a lot on how to prepare, what to look for in the future. It was a real shockwave for us at the time. It was a crisis. And obviously for a few days and the aftermath, it was really a dreadful event. And it was the day of the opening, and it had all the possible drama. But it was one element that day at 9 o'clock in the morning. What is completely different in the decision that has been made and the crisis we went through, and to some extent we're still in, mm-hmm. is that it was unfolding each and every day, each and every hour, under our eyes, starting in the country, in China, making a number of decisions, then moving and coming closer to us. And it's not it's not a one-off crisis where you have to respond. It's a crisis in duration where you have to take the pulse constantly. So what we had to do here is to involve a number of actors, and to name but a few, obviously on the Tokyo side, the national government, the Tokyo metropolitan government, the sanitary authorities there, World Health Organization, to constantly understand where it was going. And up until the 23rd of March, we were looking into the evolution and saying, let's give ourselves more time, because it could be that it stays in Asia. Europe seems to be under control. Italy was starting, but we're still, you know, looking at it from a little bit of a distance. Then on the 23rd of March, WHO and Dr. Tedros says, well, it's a pandemic. Africa is now affected. It had just started a few days ago. And the rest of the world will be affected. It's not the same ball game anymore. We're all in. It's not a matter of controlling an epidemic in Tokyo and Japan. It's a pandemic that goes worldwide. At that point in time, and after obviously having kept all the federations, the NOCs, IOC members, media organizations, sponsors, everybody involved on a day-to-day basis, almost, at that point in time, it became obvious we had to do something. Hence, that decision on the 24th between Prime Minister Abe and President Bach, and then the subsequent decision a few days later to reschedule for July 2021. So you see, it's the nature of the crisis which accelerated until that declaration where we were forced to react.
Yeah, because like you said, I mean, the situation was evolving literally on a day-to-day basis.
It still does.
Yeah,
it still does. Every day you read another country, another dramatic situation, other dire situations for people. Every single day it evolves.
Yeah, I mean, I can completely imagine what that was like. But, you know, you talked about the fact that you kept obviously all the stakeholders very much as part of that conversation. You mentioned the other international federations, your national Olympic committees, even your partners in terms of sponsors, etc. Was there any resistance to this postponement, basically in terms of, you know, concerns from federations, reservations about the postponement because of what the fallout for them could be?
Relief. Actually, relief. The pressure was immense on anyone. Everyone was in a situation, including the federations, and I will talk about the federations and some of their concerns at the time. But everybody was under tremendous pressure. So it was rather a sense of relief, because the unknown of whether it would happen or not. Some of the athletes saying, well, you know, it's not fair. Some can continue to train, we cannot. Some have qualified, others we don't know. They were in a situation calling to their NOCs, to their international federation and us to say a decision has to be made. So no resistance, but a great relief. Then there was a time where we had to discuss about the dates, and there as well it was particularly important to discuss with the IFs, because obviously the calendar of events internationally is structured around the Olympic Games and the major events, the World Championships, etc. So once you move a year, it has a number of side effects, and there I would say the international federations were just stellar. Some said, okay, give us a few more days to discuss with our organizers to make sure there will not be any negative impact on our side. And they came back extremely quickly. So for the IFs, the concerns were always athletes, qualifications, fair qualifications, scheduling or rescheduling, but all in all, incredibly positive. Really incredible.
That's great to know. And, you know, we'll come back to the question of the athletes qualification and just a bit more details on that a bit later. But since you say that the decision was really in a way unanimous and it led to everyone sort of coming on board and working to try and reorganize the international sporting calendar, it's also important to know what what were the athletes saying at this time? I mean, you know, through your athletes commission or other channels of communication that you would have with the athletes, what were the main concerns for athletes at the time when this decision was taken?
I think I raised them. It was mainly those that could not train, that those that would fear they wouldn't have time to qualify. And there was always a question regarding anti-doping, and in all these countries shutting down all activities, whether proper tests could be followed or not. So these were the main things. And also the last concern was, it is our big moment. We have to be in the best shape of our lives. And when confinement starts, you know, to drag in time, then you reduce that window of opportunity to train and be at your very best level. So that we heard a lot at the time. And it was very complicated for them, very complicated for us to hear also these comments at the time where we couldn't make a decision. Because realize that until you have the government of Japan, which is the underwriter for the games, and the Tokyo municipal government that underwrites as well the games, and indication from WHO that we are in a pandemic, it's very complicated for the IOC to make a one-sided final decision, you see.
Yeah.
So there was the pressure on the side of the athletes, and rightly so, other stakeholders as well. But we had to have the consent of everyone and all the pieces put together until we could say, okay, we postpone. Because let's be very clear, the number of impact is immense on everyone, including in Japan. So to have the government of Japan and all the actors, the organizing committee obviously saying, okay, this really is something we need to do because we realize we cannot host the game this summer. Voila, we needed to have everyone on the same sheet of music.
Yeah, and like you said, you know, not knowing one way or the other is always a more difficult position to be in. Then once you've taken the decision, at least you know, okay, this has been decided. Now, what do we do next? So what are the next steps now? What are you working on now? What are the next steps, and you know, how does this go forward?
Before that, isn't it Churchill? You know, when you don't know, you always say Churchill. He said so many things, but who said something like, genius is the art to make a decision based on uncertain information, or something like that. Anyway, at some point you have to make a call. Then you make that call. Yeah. And this is what has to be done now. First, we have to do for the first time something we've never done, which is to build up a system that is ready to deliver. We are a few months out from the game, so people are trained, volunteers are recruited, clothing is ready, test events are ongoing, qualifications ongoing, thousands of people working in the organizing committee, and you have to pause. You have to pause and say, okay, now, out of all of this system, what do we keep now to replan for the games? And replan for the games post-COVID cannot be the same games. From the color and tones of the opening ceremony to the social distancing, we know it cannot be exactly the same flavor and the same operation. So we have to first now decide what will be the final product. Okay, so replan.
Yeah.
Ask people to stay home one day to the next, thousands of them, to reappoint most of them in spring next year. Never done, okay? But at the same time, we have to make sure we are forensically looking into everywhere we can save. We have a finite amount of money, it's 5.9 billion. There was a contingency at the time of the postponement, so it's good, they had a contingency still. But we have to save to minimize the cost of the postponement. So we have made, at that point in time, a list of about 200 ideas that we are discussing with the organizers and very soon with our stakeholders, the IFs and the NOCs especially, to see which one have really a good financial outcome while not compromising on the one and one most important thing, it is sport, field of play, athletes. The rest, sandwiches rather than hot food, that's okay. Water instead of, it's all right. That we have to preserve. Anything else we're looking into. So that's the second stream of activity. And third, we have to look into different scenario because of the unknown. We live in uncertain times. What is the sanitary situation a year from now? And we have to have different plans. So replan, save, scenario. This is what we do.
Okay. But the scenarios, as you said, are still based on extremely uncertain times. We don't know what it's going to be like next summer as well. So what really are the sort of plan B and plan C that you're looking at? And are you also considering the possibility of a made-for-TV event where maybe the focus on physical in-stadia spectators is not that much?
I would love to say, okay, I have all these plans and it's done, and plan A, B, C. We don't. We're looking into the greatest schemes and what could be the situation. Either it's controlled and we have minimal operational impacts. Another one is it is controlled totally in Japan, but not everywhere else. And that already is very complicated because it means that you have to have systems of quarantine in order to have the whole family together in Tokyo. So that's the second scenario where you still have clusters of COVID present across different countries. And the third would be games within a COVID context all across. That is, you have clusters a little bit everywhere, not the same pandemic. Would be extremely complicated, but we won't be there.
Yeah.
And there you would have obviously very different operational impacts. Now, whether we would have spectators, 1,000 spectators, as it's been discussed for Switzerland and football, that I don't know.
Yeah.
But these are the scenarios we have to look into. And for each of these, what does it mean for the Olympic Village, the dining hall for the athletes, transportation, public transportation, games transportation, venue operations, access to the venues, etc., etc. So you see, for these three big buckets of ideas, you have then different sort of impacts, but we have to be ready.
Yeah, and as we keep saying, you know, the situation keeps changing. We don't know. Fingers crossed, maybe things will be normal by this time next year. We don't know.
The one thing I can reveal, and I don't think it is a secret because these are public declarations that are made, but out of a meeting in WHO most recently, I was reassured to hear that all in all, the collective efforts across the countries are really amazing, and we see this, okay, every day in the news. But that we learn more and more, and that science also has geared up to develop medics and vaccines. So when I came out of this meeting, I was somewhat reassured that yes, it is an absolute dramatic situation, but at the same time, we know more and more what it is, and we know it is complicated, but we learn each and every day. We transfer in information, best practices. So in a year from now, obviously we'll be far more clever than today.
Well, hopefully. We are learning a lot from what's going on. The thing is that this situation, and you talked about the situation having various fallouts, impacts, ripple effect on many different stakeholders. So just speaking about the financial aspect, because you said you're working on this plan where you're looking to see where you can actually balance the budget and save and, you know, find ways to save. The big question that everyone's asking right now is, who is really bearing the cost of the postponement of the games? And I know a lot's been written about it, but it would be great to hear about it from you.
Okay, so structurally, we have a host city contract that establishes basically three things: the legal context in which we operate, the technical elements of the project, and the commercial elements as well. Mm-hmm. So there, it's fairly simple. The IOC and Olympic movement makes an initial contribution. In the case of Tokyo, $1.6 billion to the success of the games. And that's our initial investment, if you wish, in the project. Mm-hmm. But then the costs are really separate. The cost of organizing the games on one side, the cost to the IOC and the rest of the Olympic family on the other side. And we will continue to operate under this umbrella of the host city contract, right? As a result, Tokyo on its side is looking into its budget. And again, we're contributing, all of us Olympic family, in order to find savings, very important, but their budget will be covered by their resources, while the financial impact, which is immense as well on the Olympic family, is mm-hmm. then taken over by the IOC and the rest of the Olympic family. So that's the way it is split currently. And that will be the case until delivery.
So this is the
this
thing.
Clear?
Yeah, very much so, actually. And the Olympic family, you talk about the IOC taking that responsibility. There are many federations, the international sports federations, that are largely dependent on redistribution of Olympic revenues for their budgets. So how is that being mitigated, and what is the sort of advice and support that is going out from the IOC to them?
We've heard a lot of testimonials, including yesterday when we had all IOC members and obviously a number of international federations taking the floor. And indeed, the situation is dramatic for many of them because they have to cancel whole seasons. Mm-hmm. So to put it simply, you still have the costs, but you have no revenue against it. So the situation is extremely complicated now. To try to assist our colleagues and they're not on the phone with us, on the visio with us, but our Director General, Christophe Dubi, we have our Sport Director, Kit McConnell, we have our Chief Operating, Lana Haddad. They've been involved with the international federations and also the authorities here in Switzerland, Canton de Vaud and Confédération, to try to find solutions and help and assist. Because as I said very early on, we're all in the same boat. So we have to show solidarity and find ways and means to activate any assistance that we can. Advice is also given to the National Olympic Committees on how to approach their government for financial assistance. Many governments have put in place measures like we have seen in Switzerland to mm-hmm. assist sport, not only sport at elite level, but also the smaller clubs and the smaller leagues, which is very good because sport really matters. Sport is important. So you have that governmental support that is important and needs to be tapped into. This is how we can all survive.
Yeah, but what do you think about the individual athlete then? You know, and I get some clarity from you about the IOC working with even the Swiss authorities, as you said, helping out the federations. Hopefully all of this filtering down to the clubs and non-elite sport level as well. But if I ask you about the individual athlete, many of them, you know, they sort of survive on public and private sponsorships, etc., to fund their training. Now, yeah. For some of them, they might be facing a question of funding because of this extra 1 year where they have to fund their training and preparation. Does the IOC or you personally, do you have any advice for them?
Advice would be a bit presumptuous from myself because you have so many different situations. But what we have done as an institution is to make sure that Olympic solidarity would continue. So the funding for the athletes' training would be maintained throughout. Many of them depend on the money from Olympic solidarity through NOCs and NFs down to the athletes themselves. So that was our way to help and said, okay, this is what you can rely on at least. Then what they should do, again, I wouldn't be in a position to respond. The situations are so different, whether you are a professional athlete in a sport that generates a lot of money, or some of the other sports where you have the passion, you have the exposure, but not necessarily the revenues. So different.
Yeah.
The one thing though is that, again, sport matters. The athletes are the new heroes and icons. They generate a lot of goodwill and inspiration. They have the capability to reach out and generate. So that power needs to be harnessed. This is how they can probably get further assistance.
Yeah, and you know, you speak of the power of sport, and it's never been more relevant than today. I feel, because when the world is looking at the situation that's so bleak, we all know the kind of joy that sport can inspire among people. So this, I was actually holding on to this question for a little bit towards the end, but I'm going to ask you this now. In today's scenario, and more so as a result of what's happened in the last 2-3 months, what is the real value of holding the Olympic Games? What do the games bring to the world, which you feel maybe you have a different take on it today than you had when you joined the IOC in 1996, for example?
Do you think it's an easy question, that one, or
probably
what?
not, but let's probably not, but let's not keep it all easy. No, just, you know, your personal view on that, really. You know, what is the value?
Have you ever been in an opening ceremony, or?
I have, actually, in Athens. Where? In 2004.
Okay.
Yeah.
For me, the first time was in Nagano, so it's a long time ago. But you know, that unique feeling that you have when the start of the ceremony first, that countdown, where you have that feeling that for the last 10 seconds, the eye of the world are on that place and that stadium, including when you have the Queen jumping from the helicopter, right? And you know that everybody is watching, and then you have that defining moment where the athletes come into the stadium, and this is the Parade of Nations. Where do you get that? Where else do you have all the flags and all these people happy, being here for one purpose, in peace and harmony with the ultimate respect and friendship? Where do you get it? And my feeling is that this will matter more than ever before, because at the same time, then we are in a dire social, economic, and sanitary situation. Yeah. We have to recognize that the political tensions are also immense around the globe. And when you have Tokyo opening ceremony in July 2021, and everybody is there with the spirit that I just described, it matters even more. And what we are forced to do now, but it's very interesting as well, is to think about the games in 2021 with a different mindset. These were the reconstruction games, and it was immensely important to give that hope to the regions affected in Japan. But I would say that it was Japan hosting the rest of the world, and for the purpose of celebrating the overcoming of the great disaster. Next year, it's wider than this. It is the entire world gathering together in Tokyo to celebrate overcoming COVID-19. So the positioning of the games and the key words that you would, and the key values that you would associate, yeah, and establish your entire set of actions and decisions, starting with the creative content of the ceremony, has to be altered. It cannot be the same ceremony. It has to be different. So what is really interesting is that those core values of sport, where we bring people together, and especially the games, will be even more meaningful, and that reinforced purpose will be extremely powerful. So I think that from a brand standpoint, it will actually reinforce what it stands for.
And see, this is the amazing thing about coming through something negative and finding that positive. And I couldn't agree with you more. In fact, you were talking about the feeling at the opening ceremony, and I was getting goosebumps just listening to you. So we all know exactly what kind of feeling you're talking about. And I think that, you know, sport brings that more than anything else in the world. But, you know, just looking even beyond just sport, and because we're talking about how the world is going to come through this together, what do you think have been the biggest learnings for society as a whole, and maybe for you personally as a manager, as someone who's, you know, handling a crisis? What are the big learnings that have come through already from what's happening?
I'll start with sport, and there I don't know where to stop, because the question is extremely wide, and I'm not necessarily the best qualified. But if I start with sport, the one thing that we've come across, which is very interesting, is that each and every government, including where you had the most stringent of confinements, sport was always mentioned as a critical activity for health and mind. And I found it very interesting that people, our neighbors in France, we were not through that in Switzerland, but in France, they could go out an hour for urgent matters, for food shopping and sport.
Yeah.
And every time it was mentioned sport is really important. And not only elite sport for all of us, because sport is health. It is just phenomenal that now, through this crisis, even WHO says we have 3 pillars in our strategy now. We have health, and sport is health. It's at the very heart of it. Then you have the capacities and capabilities of the medical systems. And then the third pillar is to develop capabilities for crisis management. But the first pillar is health, maintain people healthy, and at the very core, sport. So that's the first thing. Then we've made in businesses around the world, and I've heard a number of people saying that we found real efficiencies in working remotely, and the tools that we have, like this afternoon, are incredibly powerful. So you can still maintain the connection between people. Okay, it's not the human touch, but nevertheless, you can work quite effectively. And all of us, we project ourselves in a future where there will be less travels. Of course, you have to form the relationships, you have to create the bonds, because this is only then that you can trust each other behind the screen.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, the amounts of traveling can be drastically reduced. I think as well that we all agree that consumptions will be reviewed, and local consumption will come to the forefront. And most probably as well, and that's not a paradox, but that's a paradigm for international sports. By definition, sport outside of the leagues within the country is very international, but it will be that for a time, and because of travel restrictions and so on and so forth, sport will also be localized, and we have to have a look at that too. So all in all, there will be positives coming out of this. For me, what is the most appealing of the ideas is if all of us, we have realized through this crisis that the world post-COVID is a different one, where our collective responsibilities have to be taken. Yeah. So what else? We could cover more ground, but
but I think you pretty much summed it up, haven't you? Because this is exactly people realizing about how much we were perhaps over-consuming, looking at ways of scaling things down, making things simpler. Even this session, as you said, we would have probably been having this as a, an in-person big session somewhere in a big grand hall. But we're doing this online, and we have 400 people from all over the world with us. And this is something that we didn't even consider so seriously before. So yeah, there's been some interesting developments. Well, let's take some questions from our participants now. I think I can see quite a few questions lined up already. So I'm going to start taking the questions. And okay, let me see. There's a question. Okay, so the first question that's come in is, if there's a figure, can you put a figure to the cost of the postponement of the games?
No. Okay. No, I cannot put a figure at this point in time for Tokyo, and we are doing this exercise. We have at our level estimated some of the costs and the risks associated with the postponement, and you've probably seen that the executive board has decided to put an envelope of 800 million together to face the increase on our side, but that's on our side. On Tokyo, it is more complicated. Let me tell you why. Imagine that you have 40,000 hotel rooms. You have to resign about 550 properties. They are all booked for the summer of 2021. Some of the convention centers as well, they were full in 2021, but these are sport venues for 2020 that we will need to use. So all these negotiations are taking place. So the actual cost on their side is far more complicated because the number of variables is immense. So it's really daunting. They foresee that they would have completed their negotiations by the end of July. From now to the end of July, it's negotiation to renew all the contracts. And then with the work that we are doing, around that time, it's slightly later, we would have then the savings that we can make. Yeah. But between the increase and the savings, we would then be in a position probably this autumn to have the actual financial impact of Tokyo.
Well, that's the thing, because it's still an ongoing situation, and it's really
day-to-day negotiation.
Yeah, exactly. So
you have the whole system signed, guaranteed, geared up for this summer, and again, transitioning. It's not simply to take the same contract and resign. Those guarantees are not valid anymore.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your question. As Christophe said, probably the answer to that, a more specific figure, will be more apparent a bit later in the year. Let's move on to the next question. This COVID-19 crisis has impacted countries in a different time frame, and countries' responses have been different. So how will it be possible to provide a safe and fair environment for athletes on the road to Tokyo 2021?
There were many good ideas shared yesterday between the IOC members during this consultation. There are different systems that are being tried and tested around the globe, and the intention is for the IOC to be the platform to exchange all these best practices and share what works in the context and see whether it's applicable elsewhere. So it ranges from, for example, in Argentina, they have created a system where athletes are tested, and then they have created a safe environment where they can all train together. Okay, so this is one of the way. Then in Africa, they're thinking about more regional centers and see whether they can move athletes and from which sports. So we're trying and learning as we go. On the other end, and much more simpler, you've seen a number of athletes sharing also how they train back home. And you have now in some sport platforms of exchanges, so that athletes can share how they can best prepare while remaining home. So you see, we have to be creative in order to create the opportunities for everyone. And as far as we can, a fair ground.
Okay. Let's get the next question in. This one is about any possible knock-on effects for Beijing 2022, which will then be held 6 months after Tokyo 2021.
Yeah, we discussed this with Beijing a few weeks ago, and we're looking into the more bright side of it. So what we feel is that we have a lot to gain. For the first time since 1992, obviously at the time you had 2 games the same year, you remember. But this time around, we're going from strength to strength. We deliver the games in Tokyo, July, and 6 months later we are in Beijing. So we feel that from a communication and engagement standpoint, there is something to do here. We're looking into symbolic dates where we could do combined activities together. So we feel we have opportunities at this level. We are also looking into the more logistical and operational matters, and see whether some of the material, for example, the overlay temporary constructions, some of the equipment from broadcasters would go directly from Japan to China.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
you know, in order to avoid. So we're looking into this, but all in all, we believe that it is not bad at all. On the contrary, once that decision was made, we're looking at the bright side and saying, okay, how can we now build on this unique situation and make sure we benefit from it?
Okay. We had a Katie in Carboni write into us actually a couple of days ago. So I'm going to make sure that I take her question. She's an Italian lawyer, and she wants to know, with regards to anti-doping controls, has the IOC put in place special recommendations in order to manage this in a period of reduced controls?
We have had the conversation yesterday, but I will have to respond via Dr. Budget, because the situation is very complicated here. This is certainly an area where there is more limited testing, and there are no in-competition tests. So obviously the volumes and the movement of people has been restricted. So it's not the same situation across the globe in each and every country. However, you still have WADA's intelligence that is working in collaboration with the regional organizations. So that is ongoing, but as far as the testing is concerned, obviously it's lower. As soon as it can resume in the various countries, we have to be pragmatic, and as soon as it is possible to move, then tests will resume as well. Now, to respond more in depth, I think it's better you send me the question, and I'm sure Dr. Budget will be more elaborate.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to send you quite a few questions, because we don't have time to take all the questions that are coming in. There's a lot of questions coming in. Okay, so I have another question here from Andre. He says, what are the IOC's requirements and expectations from international federations in order to deliver a successful games? Have these expectations changed, reduced, increased in any way?
This is a question that is not necessarily linked to the situation in Tokyo, but it's more of evolution of policy that was established in the context of Agenda 2020. We have discussed at length with international federations over time and how they could participate further in the delivery of the Olympic Games. As a result, we have put in place now a flexible system whereby the organizing committees and the IFs can discuss together what parts of the sport will be delivered by the international federation. Mm-hmm. Not all of them have the same capabilities, but what we see is a desire, all in all, to be more involved with organizing committees. Okay. Because it simplifies the delivery of sport. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. They have the knowledge, they have the expertise to deliver events in their sport on a regular basis. Then it's an adaptation to the games and to that context. So there is an overarching strategy, which is more involvement, more assistance from the international federations vis-à-vis the organizing committees. And I would say the first games that will be delivered according to this new model is Paris 2024. And discussions are ongoing with international federations. Very interesting, very interesting.
Yeah, I hope that answers your question, Andre. We touched upon briefly, Christophe, on the aspect of sponsors before, but we didn't actually go into it on detail. So I have a question about that. How do you expect that sponsorship will be affected? On the one side, there's probably going to be less spectators, maybe more viewers. On the other side, COVID-19, it's creating more publicity than anything right now. I'm not quite sure what that part of the question means, but essentially, how is this affecting sponsorship, both with the IOC and also for the organizing committee? And what have your discussions been like with your top partners, for example?
We are incredibly fortunate. The companies so far that are partnering with us have been incredible in their support. Incredible. Cannot say different. Understanding, supporting the message, reconfirming their total commitment and support. We've had a lot of briefings with them. Our director of games operation, Pierre Ducret, has had a lot of meetings with just about everyone, including the sponsors with our friends of IOC TMS. And frankly, hat off.
Okay.
Many questions about, okay, what happens to our rooms, down payment made so far, can we transfer to 2021? Same for the ticketing, etc. Very operational, but no discussions. And in Tokyo, it is actually the same. In Tokyo, I would even say that what is outstanding is they are asking all of the companies that support Tokyo, including through providing secondees to the organizing committee, to extend those secondees, which means actually making an extra effort. And a number of them are going with it. So it's fabulous as well on the Japanese side. So I think it speaks volume for the quality of the relationship, but also the importance of the project.
Okay, excellent. That's really good to know. I just want to make a quick comment to some of the questions that are coming in. I think we've answered some of these before, so I'm not going to ask the same question.
So you said that they were not listening, right? Or I was not clear.
I think some of them probably joined a bit late because we have some questions that are repeating, but I'm sure when you watch the recording, you'll get your answers. So that's what I suggest you do. But we'll move on to this one, which is talking about the possibility of if the world does not recover. This is in fact from Kazuhiro, who says, if the world does not recover from the pandemic at all within a year, then what happens to the staging of the games, given that the powers that be in Tokyo have said that it's not going to be possible to postpone it again?
Yeah, a couple of considerations. First, I think it's really premature. And second, it's extremely pessimistic, because the very comment I made in the beginning, or maybe not so much the beginning, but at some point I made a comment regarding what the World Health Organization itself believes, which is that the efforts that are made are truly incredibly helpful, and that science is progressing rapidly as well, with a lot of exchange across teams to fight. So it's really premature, first. Second, we know more every day. So I would be lying to you if I was not saying that we are 150% working on delivering Tokyo July 2021. We don't make any effort to envisage anything different. That's our commitment. Everything I've said up until now, the savings, the scenarios, and everything, is geared toward delivering Tokyo 2021.
Okay. Well, thanks very much for that. Just looking ahead a little bit, I have a question from Julia, who says, how does this situation, the postponement and everything that we've learned from it, impact the next edition of the Games? Is there any kind of changes that we are looking at already for Paris and Los Angeles?
Very interesting question. Yes, it does. And we have had with the organizing committees, like every other stakeholders, regular conversations, and we have shared already the list of the 200 measures I was talking about, potential savings we have shared with the next ones as well, because they have to know that we are looking into this, and maybe they can even help Tokyo, because there is intelligence, creativity elsewhere as well, and it will in any case benefit them as well. It's as I said, the world post-COVID in any case has everybody thinking about their games and the way they were positioned before and the way they will have to reposition in respectively 2024 and 2028. So I would say there is the greater strategy and the purpose of the games that needs to be refined. Both of them were very clear in terms of vision and legacies, but that has to be reviewed with a new filter now and what could make even more sense. And then from an operational and financial standpoint, plenty we can learn from Tokyo and invent for the future. So yes, a lot to come, to come.
Very interesting indeed. I think we have time for probably just one or two more questions. So this one is, it's about the suppliers, not the sponsors, but have all manufacturers and suppliers for the games cooperated and been reactive to maintaining their services, their installations, and all the support that's needed for the games to now take place next year?
We have not heard anything different so far. Again, at least on our side, but it's a far smaller number. In Tokyo, as I said before, all these contracts, and we're speaking thousands of them, they are currently going through, but we've not heard anything different at this point in time. So no, I don't know. If, then you have one caveat to this comment, and it's the economic situation. Hopefully everybody goes through. But if things stand and circumstances do not change, we would anticipate we don't have any major problem in this respect. No.
Okay. And maybe this might be our last one. So let's take this question about the Olympic flame. In fact, I wanted to know what will happen to the Olympic flame and to the torch relay.
So the Olympic flame is in Tokyo. So it has landed, it's burning. And now we're thinking about different concepts. I don't want to go too far, but we feel we have to share that flame that is burning and make sure that everybody can enjoy it. So let's see what we can do virtually with the flame. And as far as the relay is concerned, we are into this scenario planning I was describing before. What is the context in May of 2021? I do not know, but we have to be prepared for different scenarios to deliver a relay the way it is traditionally done, or to review, scale back, adjust, adapt. And that's why for any of these big dimensions, we have to have different scenarios.
Okay, so as with everything else, it's ongoing, and creative solutions to new situations, right? That's what it's about now.
And you see, that's a very important point that you are making. Creative solutions, it's not always easy, but it's a question of culture as well that you create within organizations. And I must say that we are very fortunate about this very organization, the IOC. We have had a tremendous team experience, starting with the president that has never been present more than during these days. For the first time, he went back to Germany yesterday. So he's been with us all the time, and it's been seven days a week, always pushing for for thinking laterally and creatively. And you see this this culture that you create is fundamental, because in a crisis like that, obviously you have all the management books, right? And everything that is said is basically right. How you communicate to the different phases of a crisis, but in the end, it's all about people, the trust between each other, the expertise you can rely on, the experience of people around you, the training that they had before, and once you have this trust, once you're certain about the capabilities, and management is creating this context where, okay, we're in together, let's be creative and find the solutions. It's actually motivating, which is a paradox, because when you're in a situation like this where your whole world falls apart, and that radical decisions have to be made, you can still find joy in interacting with those around you, because there is that feeling of being really together. So it was the case within the IOC, and that feeling as well with the rest of the family. And when we speak about the Olympic family, it's because this is what it is. When you're in real trouble, what you do is reach out, and interactions were constant. On both sides, NOCs contacting us and the reverse, federations, sponsors, etc. So the real sense of a greater family. So really something incredibly valuable.
And that's a nice note to end on, I think, because it goes full circle back to what you started off with, the fact that we are all in this together. And it's the one thing, it might be a difficult situation, but it's actually uniting the world. And we're all trying to find, creative solutions together, and hopefully come out of this better as a society. So thank you. Thank you very much, Christophe. I really, really appreciate, on behalf of AISTS, your time, your candor, your humor, just, being so open in what you said to us today. And we look forward to continuing this conversation in the days to come. But thank you for the moment.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Really great. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to all our participants as well. I do apologize. We were not able to take all your questions because there were really a lot of them, but we'll try and get you your answers in the days to come. Thanks all. Thanks very much. Bye-bye, everyone.
Goodbye.